Before the season started, we had high hopes for the Chicago Bears to make the playoffs, for Caleb Williams to throw for 4,000 yards, and for Ben Johnson to win Coach of the Year. And while none of those things are out of the question just yet, some are looking less likely than others.
You are Locked On Bears, your daily Chicago Bears podcast. Part of the Locked On Podcast Network, your team every day.
This is Locked On Bears, and I'm your host, Lauren Cox. I'm here to bring you your daily, in-depth Chicago Bears news and analysis. You can follow me on Twitter at CoxSports1, and you can follow the podcast at Locked On Bears on TikTok, Instagram, Facebook, Twitter, and the Locked On Bears YouTube channel, where you can keep up with all of our video podcasts as well. Thanks for making Locked On Bears your first listen today. We're part of the Locked On Podcast Network, your team every day. Today's episode is brought to you by FanDuel. Right now, new customers can bet just $5, and if your bet wins, you'll get $300 in bonus bets to use across the app. On the show today, I want to check in on some of the bigger picture goals and hopes for this Bears season and see, do we need to readjust our expectations down a little bit more after the first 4 games of the season and kind of figure out what's still within reach and what might be a little harder to obtain than we would have initially thought before the season. So we'll talk about it in the context of the postseason, in the context of what Caleb Williams can accomplish this season, and also Ben Johnson as well, as sort of this bigger picture team expectations, sitting at 2-2 coming out of the bye week. Let's start with the playoff conversation, because that to me feels like maybe the lowest of these bars to clear. Like, not that it's not a big accomplishment to make the playoffs, but like at 2-2, even with a slow start, I mean the league is wide open, right? Of course, like I don't think anybody has been literally eliminated from the playoffs. I think there are some teams that you can feel pretty confident aren't going to make the playoffs at this point, but the Jets are the only win-this team in football. Like, everyone's got something going on. And even though the Bears do sit at last place in the NFC North, they are far from eliminated from the playoff picture. And really, you know, we all can kind of understand the team has struggled and that this doesn't look like a playoff caliber team right now, but there is a lot of season left. And no one should be coming out here saying, hey, like, oh, the Bears are going to go on some super deep playoff run, but it's not totally out of question here. And that's what I kind of want to check in on, because I think entering the season, it was kind of split on like maybe the Bears would be a borderline playoff team. And given the slow start, their playoff chances feel a little bit less for sure. But I don't think it's totally out of the question. And that's kind of where I wanted to start looking at here. Because I think there's 2 angles for the can the Bears make the playoffs conversation that happen simultaneously here. Like, there's one, you got to win a certain amount of games to get in the playoffs, right? At a minimum, you know, like 9 at the minimum, but probably like 10 to be safe, and certainly 11. Like, the Bears have to win their games. But then also, like we saw last season, you need other teams in the NFC to not win as many games. There needs to be an open playoff paths here, unlike, you know, last year when you had the Packers and Vikings and Lions all in the playoffs. Like, there's not a lot of room there for the Bears to be able to sneak in. So, like, there's stuff you can control, and then there's stuff from everybody else. So let's start with like the Bears' own path from here at 2-2. I don't necessarily want to just like go through every game and play the win-loss game of like, okay, you know, win this game, lose that game, win that game, and that gets you to these number of wins, and then you get there. But like, to do it a little bit more loosely than that, rather than go like week by week here. Like, we'll see about the Commanders this week, but like, when you think about the Bears' schedule from what it was on paper to what it is now, this next stretch, really after the Commanders game, has gotten a lot easier on paper than it looked like in June or May when the schedule came out. That, you know, we knew the Saints would be a bad team, but now the Ravens in week 8 look very, very beatable. They're a 1-win football team right now. The Bengals in week 9 just traded for Joe Flacco, because that's where they're at from a quarterback standpoint with Joe Burrow's injury, and their offensive line is terrible. Like, those 2 were games we penciled in as losses on paper when the schedule came out that are now much, much more winnable. And then the Giants in week 10, not a very good football team right now. So like, you could have a stretch there where it's not totally ridiculous to think, I mean, could the Bears win 4 games in a row, Saints, Ravens, Bengals, Giants. I'm not here to like claim that's hard to do. It's hard to win 4 games in a row ever in the NFL. But all of a sudden, the playoff conversation gets a little bit more realistic if you go on a 4-game winning streak in the middle of the season. And sort of the elephant in the room there is that, well, the schedule does get harder from there. Vikings, Steelers, Eagles, Packers, the next 4 games are like, a little tougher, but the Vikings have been a beatable team, and the Steelers are leading the AFC North, but I don't think they're like some dominant powerhouse team. And now we're seeing the Packers not as great as they looked in week 1, losing to the Browns, tying to the Cowboys team that the Bears whooped. So it's not like, I think over the course of the season, at first it was like, the Packer games are going to be way harder than they were before. And now maybe they're not so much. And before it was like, the Bengals and Ravens are going to be tough games. And now maybe not so much. So all of a sudden it's a little bit easier to talk yourself into some more wins there, even though the Bears haven't really put it all completely together in a sustainable way just yet. But they're making enough progress of like they found a way to win against the Raiders, and they found a way to really take it to the Cowboys a little bit there. And not that all their problems are solved and they're not going to still have tough games. Like I don't know that this game against the Commanders this week is going to go super, super well, but we'll break that down on Crossover Thursday, coming up this week on the podcast. But like, I do think the path opens up a little bit. And so then it becomes the question of like, okay, so say the Bears can get to 9 wins or heaven forbid, maybe even 10. I mean, it feels like it's asking a lot at this point. Like, is there going to be a spot for them in the postseason? We think about, like the rest of the NFC trying to push for playoff spots as well. And I think when you look at like the standings right now, and of course we can't really project out after everyone else has played 5 games, the Bears and Packers and others are at 4. Like you can't quite project out like, okay, the teams that are in second place right now, how many games they're going to win. But like Eagles are going to make the playoffs in some capacity. Commanders are probably going to make the playoffs in some capacity. The Lions look like they're going to make the playoffs in some capacity. Buccaneers are probably going to run away with their division. And then 49ers, Rams, and Seahawks are all in that conversation. And so then it kind of becomes a question of like, can the Bears be better than the Packers and Vikings? Can the Bears be better than the Commanders? Can they be better than the Rams or the Seahawks? Like I think there's a handful of 5 or 6 teams here that are going to be fighting for those last 3 wild card spots. And the Bears may make a lot of progress, but if the Commanders are still better and the Rams are still better and either the Packers or the Vikings are still better, like you're kind of SOL there. Even if the Bears turn things around and win some more games and give you a much more hopeful season down the stretch, like it feels like you're going to really need that 10th win at a minimum to like secure a spot. And kind of like last year where even a 10-win team could miss the playoffs based on tiebreakers. And so how you fare in those divisional games, the one more Vikings game, one more Lions game, and 2 more Packers games, like those are going to be potential playoff implication games. Even this Commanders game could be a potential head-to-head tiebreaker type situation with them when it comes down to an eventual possible maybe wild card spot. And all that is like intentionally getting very ahead of ourselves here, and you still got to win the football games before you can start having the playoff conversation. I just think it's interesting because of how slow the season started. At 0-2, it was like this team isn't going to come anywhere near the playoffs. I mean, this is a disaster, and everything's going to take a while. And you win 2 games, and other teams start to fall apart, and all of a sudden, it doesn't feel totally out of the question. I think it feels less likely than it was preseason, but not like totally gone yet either, because the schedule has lightened up because of things that are outside of the Bears' control. So then if the Bears can start to figure some things out here along the way, you can talk yourself back into that conversation a little bit more. The only other caveat I'll throw on that is like, yeah, we talk about the Bears figuring some things out along the way. It all assumes that none of these other teams will, that the Ravens won't figure anything out by then, the Bengals won't figuring anything out by then, and that even by week 14 when they play the Packers, like they might figure some things out too and be a little bit of a better team by the time the Bears play there. So even as a team looks easier now, they might not be as easy by the time you actually get there. And that's what makes football season so much fun and why we love following the sport and why they don't decide the playoffs in week 5. So a lot to still get between now and then. I think it was a good check-in on like, okay, yeah, you're making progress. Other teams aren't. And if those trends continue, you might be in a great spot. But this league is very unpredictable and there's a lot of parity. So we'll see how things continue to play out. I do think you'll be surprised to find out just how close Caleb Williams is currently on path to throw for 4,000 yards this season. And it feels like nobody's talking about it, but like he's essentially on par to do it, or pretty darn close. So we'll take a look at just how close he is and what it's going to take to actually get there next on Locked On Bears. The Locked On Bears podcast is brought to you by FanDuel Sportsbook. The NFL season is well underway, and FanDuel has an offer you don't want to miss. Because right now, new customers can bet just $5 and get $300 in bonus bets if you win. That's right, just pick a bet, lay down just $5, and if your bet wins, not only do you get the winnings from your $5 bet, whatever the odds were, but then they're going to add an extra $300 in bonus bets into your account that you can use all across the app. So say a $5 bet on this Monday's Bears-Commanders game, where the Bears are 4.5-point underdogs on the road. The money line is Bears plus 188 right now if you want to bet them straight up to win. And the over-under point total is set at 49.5. So a $5 bet on any of those or any other game, any other prop bet, any other sport. And if you hit that first $5 bet, you're getting an extra $300 in bonus bets. It just makes watching football even more exciting when you just got a little something riding in on the action. So what are you waiting for? Visit FanDuel.com to download the FanDuel app today and get started. So I can see where playoffs feels a little bit like, whoa, are we getting ahead of ourselves here? And probably, like, I'm not here to predict. I wouldn't bet personally that the Bears are going to make the playoffs. I just think they remain further. They're closer in that conversation than maybe we felt like they were even just a couple of weeks ago. But it feels similarly like, as an idea, the idea of Caleb Williams throwing for 4,000 yards this season also feels a little bit far away. And yet I think they're a lot closer than you might think. That when you look at the math of, okay, 17 game seasons nowadays, I guess on the front end we can say the 4,000 yard threshold is not nearly as impressive as it was a decade ago. We know plenty of quarterbacks throw for 4,000 yards, but it's not, we don't have to spend a lot of time remembering that it's never happened in this team's franchise history. And so while it is a bigger picture low bar, it is locally a very important bar. And when you've had games, like against the Vikings, the Bears threw for under 200 yards and threw for barely over 200 yards against the Raiders. It's like, I don't know. He's not putting up these like monster numbers that's going to be like, the first 4 games of the season, it hasn't felt like, oh, Caleb Williams is on pace to set a Chicago Bears franchise record for passing yards. And yet he is literally on pace to set the Chicago Bears franchise record in passing yards. So far this season, Caleb Williams has averaged 231.8 yards per game. And it's only been 4 games, so I'm willing to have trouble extrapolating that. But that over 17 games, if we just did this exact same pace, would be 3,940 yards. He is, I did the math, he is less than 4 yards per game below what he needs to get to 4,000 yards. So again, Caleb is at 231 per game. If you take 4,000 yards and divide it by 17, like the minimum average you need to hit 4,000 yards is 235. He's at 231. We're talking a 4 yard per game difference. He just needs to increase his average passing yards by 4 yards per game for the rest of the season, and he will hit 4,000 passing yards. Again, that assumes you play the entire 17-game season, but that hasn't been a real issue so far early in Caleb Williams' career, and we expect full speed ahead, ready to go there. But like, he is as close as you can get to being already on pace to be a 4,000-yard receiver, and it's not going to take that much more to get there, because I do think he has had a slower start than we anticipated, and slower than perhaps we're going to see consistently over the course of the remainder of the season. Like, there's an expectation that, well, he's not going to jump and average 300 yards per game. There's an expectation that the Caleb Williams we get over the remaining 13 games of the season will probably most of the time be better than the Caleb Williams we saw for the first 4 games of the season. Like, he is supposed to be continually progressing. And that doesn't mean every game is better than the last game, but 2 steps forward, 1 step back, 2 steps forward, 1 step back, kind of in this upward trajectory is where we think this season is going to go. And I think it's worth noting, like, out of those first 4 games, you had one against a really good Brian Flores Minnesota Vikings defense, and it was also the first game of his career with Ben Johnson. And then a game against the Detroit Lions as they were really firing on all cylinders and trying to kind of get things rolling a little bit more in that game. So then he puts up almost 300 yards at the Cowboys, and that's how you kind of elevate the average. But the way I look at it is like, over this next stretch of games, you're going to play some defenses that aren't that great. And like we talked about with the playoff path thing, like it's not to say that you play these bad defenses and the Bears are going to for sure go on that 4-game winning streak we talked about, but you should for sure be able to get some more passing yards and some more points on offense. And then the unspoken part of that is like, well, then if your defense is good enough, you'll win the game. But at a minimum, you look at like the Saints coming up in 2 weeks, bottom 10 defense in the NFL, not a very good football team. The Ravens have the worst defense in the NFL, not a very good football team right now. The Bengals have the third worst. I think they're ranked 30th in yards and points defense in football right now. And we've seen the Giants give up 40 plus points to the Dallas Cowboys, and they just gave up 26 points in their loss to the New Orleans Saints. Like, it's not that good of a New York Giants defense. So like, you can start to stack up some bigger yardage games against some of these bad defenses. And then, you'll face the Vikings again, and they're going to be tough. And you'll face the Eagles, and they're going to be tough. And, we'll see, I guess, what the Packers defense looks by the time you get to that. But the 49ers defense later in the schedule, they've been pretty good this season. Like, yeah, there are going to be 2 or 3 or 4 defenses later in the season on the schedule that you're probably not going to hit that average, and you're going to be closer to 200 or below. And that's okay, as long as you kind of make up for it with putting a bunch up on the Saints, a bunch up on the Ravens, a bunch up on the Bengals, and a bunch up on the Giants. And you can feel like over the course of that season, will that leave you with enough of that average over 235.3 yards? Like, that's all you need to hit. And it's not a very low bar, it's not a very high bar, but it's not a bar any Chicago Bears quarterback has ever hit in our lifetimes, at least over the course of a full season. I guess I think they've had quarterbacks average that for stretches of games, but they weren't healthy for enough games to hit 4,000 yards. You get the point. Caleb Williams is on a very clear and, I don't want to say easy path to 4,000 yards, but like, it doesn't feel like it's a very much of a stretch to say, yeah, Caleb should hit that based on what we've seen so far. And I think entering the season, it was like, maybe he'll hit that. I'd like to see him hit that. And it feels like, well, they still haven't been as good as they should be. And he's already going to be on pace for it. So if they get even a little bit better on offense, especially in the passing game, he should be pretty cleared for takeoff for that potential 4,000 yard threshold. I do think it's important to keep in mind that like the 4,000 yard mark, important, meaningful, especially in franchise history. But let's not forget, like, that's not the goal for like the season. It's a nice thing if you hit, like, it's a good individual goal to aim for, but like Caleb Williams' success this season and the Chicago Bears' success this season is not based on whether or not he hits a passing yardage total, right? Like, if he throws for 3,800 yards and not 4,000 yards, that will not make this season a failure. Like, the success or failure of the season is winning football games and developing the quarterback and feeling like he is ascending as a franchise player to lead your team in the long-term future and meshing well with your offensive coach and your system and everything. Like, that's what the success about this season is about. And if in doing that, winning and developing and growing, you also happen to hit 4,000 yards, that's great and worth celebrating and aiming for and shooting for. Exactly. But if we get to 17 games and he's at 3,900 yards, 3,800 yards, I mean, I'm sure there's a number that still feels like a failure, but 4,000 is not that threshold. It's more like a fun benchmark to be shooting for and something to celebrate if and when he does indeed get across that benchmark. And I think for the context of today's conversation, it just doesn't feel like, wow, he's having a 4,000 yard season just yet. And yet, even in those lack of, elite production, he's still basically on pace for a 4,000 yard season. So that's kind of like the cool thing. Like, compared to like the playoffs where it's like maybe that feels still within reach, but not as obtainable, the 4,000 yard thing is just as attainable, if not more attainable now than it was before the start of the season. And also before the start of the season, you may recall, we talked about on this podcast, that Ben Johnson was the betting favorite to win NFL Coach of the Year all throughout the offseason, all throughout the preseason. I can tell you he is no longer the betting favorite to win NFL Coach of the Year, but I don't think we should count him out either. It's going to take some things and some additional things, but it's kind of like the playoff thing where it's like there's some stuff Ben Johnson and the Bears need to do individually, and then there's some stuff other teams need to do and not do in order for Ben to still be in that mix. So we'll take a look at what that would need to look like for Ben Johnson to still potentially be that coach of the year, even though he's not the betting favorite anymore, next on Locked On Bears.
I'm Cody Rourke from Locked On Broncos, and this episode is brought to you by Peloton. Peloton is shaping the future of fitness with the brand new Peloton Cross-Training Tread Plus, powered by Peloton IQ. This is Peloton's most advanced equipment yet, giving you real-time guidance and endless ways to move, whether you're running, lifting, or you're cross-training with your favorite instructors like Alex Toussaint. It's training reimagined to make your workout more personal. Peloton is built for breakthroughs with features that help you plan, stay motivated, and hit peak performance. You can let yourself run, lift, flex, and go while Peloton handles all the rest. Plus, Peloton IQ provides real-time strength coaching, tracking your progress and suggesting weights that challenge you so you can get stronger. Plus, the new movement tracking camera, it counts your reps and corrects your form in real time, making sure every rep is safer and smarter. So let yourself run, lift, flex, push, and go. Explore the new Peloton Cross-Training Tread Plus at onepeloton.com.
So it feels weird to talk about. It feels weird to talk about Ben Johnson as a potential coach of the year right now at 2-2 in fourth place in the NFC North, entering the bye week. Just like it feels a little weird to talk about them as a playoff team, but I think it's an important contextual conversation here. And I do wonder if maybe in some ways a slow start can help with some of the like narrative storytelling of the coach of the year, performance from Ben Johnson. That like I certainly don't think starting 0-2 and now getting to 2-2 like it removes him from consideration for it. But I do think there are still going to be certain things the Bears have to accomplish this season in order for him to win Coach of the Year. And there are also things that I think are going to happen to other teams for Ben Johnson to still win Coach of the Year. Because like right now at FanDuel Sportsbook, Ben Johnson has dropped down to, I think it's 6th in betting odds for Coach of the Year. And we'll talk about some of the guys that are ahead of him here. But he went from the betting favorite to 6th best odds. It's plus 1,800 if you want to take it up and try and, cash in on it. But like, I think for the Bears to have Ben Johnson win Coach of the Year, first of all, you got to make the playoffs. I don't know that we're going to see a non-playoff head coach win Coach of the Year. So like a lot of the things we talked about at the beginning about making the playoffs would apply here. I'm not going to like, rehash that whole conversation, but like at the front end, you got to do all those things. You got to beat those bad teams we talked about, go on that winning streak that we talked about, win some of those divisional games and make the playoffs as probably a 10-win football team. Like that feels like kind of the bare minimum that you got to accomplish for him to be in the real running for Coach of the Year still. But I wonder if part of that too is like when you start 0-2 and everyone's like, oh, this is going to take a while. And then if from there you find a way to make the playoffs and go on a run and win more games than maybe you were supposed to, like in some ways, does that starting from the lower spot help that conversation and narrative? Because I think sometimes, like a team can come out pretty quick, hot and steady out of the gate. And it's like, oh, well, they've just been good all the time. So, do we really got to, was it really a big coaching turnaround job or was the team just better? They just got good players. And so, what value does the coach get as a Coach of the Year candidate there? Whereas with the Bears, you're going to be able to look at it and say, if they turn things around a little bit more out of the bye week and go on a winning streak in there and, win 8 more games this season out of the 13, they'd have to go 8-5 over the remaining 13 games of the season to get to 10 wins and a potential playoff spot. They'll look at that and say, oh, wow, like when you started 0-2, then you would have gone 10-5 over the final 15 games of the season. And what a turnaround from Ben Johnson. What a great coaching job, yada, yada, yada. He's got to be Coach of the Year. And like, that's where I think it starts. But then it's also going to be, you gotta go on that winning streak, right? We think like these kinds of awards especially I think coach of the year, but MVPs in the same way, and offensive and defensive player of the year, like they are storyline and narrative awards as much as anything. This is not a stat award. You say, okay, which coach had the highest winning percentage? Boom, he's coach of the year. It's like which QB had the most yards? He's MVP. Like, no, that's not how that one works either. Like, it's a lot more of like what the general, like, not even national media, but kind of like the average fan, like the not just Chicago people, but like what does the NFL world view this coach and this team? And if it's this story of, hey, they started slow and now they're on this winning streak and they're dominating, and Caleb Williams is looking like the best quarterback in his draft class, or he's right up there now with Jaden Daniels and Bo Nix or whatever, like, and he's a 4,000-yard passer, and the Bears have figured all this stuff out on offense, right? It's the story of the team excelling, because if you win 10 games but you're scraping by and you're struggling to throw the ball much, but you're getting some turnovers on defense that are trying to help it, like if they get to 10 wins somehow by doing what they did against the Raiders, right, where it's kind of nail-biter finishes and not necessarily anything impressive, then those 10 wins and that narrative isn't as strong for a potential coach of the year conversation. I also think a lot of it's going to depend on the games within the division too, just because the perception, right? It's like, this is one of the toughest divisions in football. Lions are great. Packers can still be great. Vikings are figuring it out. But like, if he can start winning some of those division games, and especially, you get the Packers monkey off your back. You beat him once last year, not with Ben Johnson, but that's been such a one-sided rivalry. And if Ben Johnson's the guy to, sweep the Green Bay Packers or something this season, like those 2 wins then count more than any other 2 wins in the coach of the year narrative conversation. They count the same on the record books, but like for a record like this, or for an award like this, I think that really goes a long way. And if the Bears can get one back on the Lions and beat Ben Johnson's former team, and if they can get one back on the Vikings and kind of defeat Brian Flores or whatever, right? Like this all plays into this storyline of Ben Johnson's coach of the year season. The problem is not just that the Bears have to do that, but the other guys who have passed him are going to be hard to beat in the coach of the year odds. Like you kind of need some of these other standout candidates to also struggle a little bit. Because I think even if Ben Johnson does all those things, 10 wins and winning streak and division stuff and Caleb's 4,000 yards, like it's still going to be kind of hard to top what Shane Steichen's doing with the Indianapolis Colts. Go switching to Daniel Jones early in this process, and then they start 4-1, and if they finish as a 11, 12 win team, they're gonna have more wins than the Bears. Daniel Jones could be comeback player of the year kind of thing. Like the Colts are already in the middle of this storyline of like, look at how great everything the Colts are doing is, and if they sustain that, and that's what wins you coach of the year. Like the Bears would need the Colts to drop off and for Steichen to lose some of that coach of the year momentum. I think honestly in that same division, the Jaguars and Liam Cohen are entering that conversation now, also at 4-1, I think they are, and having just beat the Kansas City Chiefs, in primetime Monday Night Football, like that's what builds that narrative of like Liam Cohen and Trevor Lawrence find a way, and that's coach of the year type stuff there. Even Kyle Shanahan from the 49ers is, I think, in this conversation because they're also 4-1 despite Brock Purdy being injured, and I mean all the injuries they've dealt with on that team, and not having Brandon Ayuk for much of this season, George Kittle not out there. I mean it's been, or not Brandon Ayuk, excuse me, but they've had injuries across that roster. No, yeah, Ayuk's on PUP. Okay, I got that right. I was getting him mixed up with other receiver, but yeah, Ayuk's been out, Kittle's been out. They've had a bunch of injuries on in the trenches, and of course the quarterback's out, and some other receivers have been out, and they're still winning all these games. And if they win 11 games with a bunch of backups, like that's the big Kyle Shanahan narrative. So like the Bears need these, or Ben Johnson, if he's going to win coach of the year, needs some of these other narratives to quiet down and die down. And it doesn't necessarily feel like, maybe 1 or 2 will, but will all 3? Like he needs his story to be big and these stories to shrink. And that's, the double whammy there is tough. But like right now the odds are Steichen is the betting favorite, Liam Cohen is second, Kyle Shanahan is third, and then Mike Vrabel is fourth. And after beating the Bills, I get that. And then Dan Campbell is fifth. And I get that he lost both coordinators, and that's probably why he's still in this conversation. But it does feel like a team that won, 15 games last season? Are they going to win coach of the year after you win 15 games. Like, they're probably going to win fewer games. I don't know if they're going to give Dan Campbell Coach of the Year if he has a season where he wins fewer games than the year before. Like, I think a basic aspect of this is, hey, the team is better this year than they were last year, and maybe the Lions can be, but like I just don't necessarily think that's the case. So it's pretty good odds for Ben Johnson right now at plus 1,800. He's just ahead of Jim Harbaugh, Mike McDonald, and Nick Sirianni are all tied for 7th behind Ben Johnson. Honestly, like, I don't think Ben Johnson's going to win Coach of the Year, but I don't think he's out of the question by any means. And I think that conversation will heat up if the Bears heat up some of the ways it looks like they can, especially after the Commanders game. And I'm not trying to get past the Commanders game because we're going to break down Washington on tomorrow's Crossover Thursday podcast with David Harrison from Locked On Commanders. So really looking forward to that conversation and getting to know the Bears opponent. Make sure you hit the subscribe button on YouTube or wherever you listen to podcasts, because that's going to be the best way to keep up with all of our daily, in-depth Chicago Bears news and analysis. Thanks for making Locked On Bears your first listen today. We're part of the Locked On Podcast Network, your team every day. If you're looking for a second listen today, you can always check out Locked On NFL for even more football talk, because it comes out twice a day. Once in the morning with Tyler Rowland, then in the afternoon with Tony Wiggins, bringing you all of the stories all across the NFL. Or go check out Locked On Cubs for the latest playoff series conversations. Plenty of other Locked On podcast networks for your second listen. Just make sure you come on back, make Locked On Bears your first listen once again tomorrow for another opportunity to bear down.